When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." 'Twas the night before New Year's, and all through the bar where I happened to be working with Jesse and Char, things were really quite quiet. What with COVID and all casting shadows across town and spreading its pall, still a right steady few, including some of you, had settled within to sample the brew. I was pouring the beer in my Santa Claus cap. The Bad Penguin Pale Ale was the most popular on tap, when all of a sudden the spigot did sputter. Instead of Bad Penguin, all I got was a splutter of carbonation and foam. So I gave out a shout, "Jesse, what's to be done? The ale has run out." Now, instead of sympathizing with my little disaster, you may be wondering, what's a Methodist pastor doing working the taps in a bar New Year's Eve? Aren't Methodists pretty dry? You'd be right to conceive. But you know, old John Wesley was quoted to say when discussing the matter, way back in his day, "Drink water only if it agrees with your digestion. If not, drink small beer." That was Wesley's suggestion. So there I was with a customer waiting to drink, but luckily Jessie was quicker to think. She took a quick look as my spigot did splatter, and she rushed to the cellar to see what was the matter. With swift work in the room where the kegs are all stored, she connected a new one, and the flow was restored. Then, as with a fresh pint I silenced my complainer, I felt a little like Jesus at that wedding at Cana. Just a little like Jesus at that wedding in Cana. On a serious note, the story, on a more serious note, the story of the wedding at Cana has had me thinking about the question, what do we do when the wine runs out? And I've been thinking about that not literally, despite my recent very brief bartending career, but I've been thinking about that question figuratively. Because haven't we all been feeling as though in some way the wine is running out? The wine of our ability to persevere through this pandemic, the wine of patience with our fellow citizens. It has taken a lot to get us through the past couple of years, each of us. It has taken each of us a lot to get where we are today, and we have further to go. We have further to go. But I know I have just been feeling so drained lately. Drained of energy, drained of my usual cheery optimism, drained of my hopefulness, and even, I have to admit it, even drained of compassion. So I want to ask all of us, as followers of the one who wouldn't let the wine run out at the party, what do we do when we feel as though the wine is giving out? When the wine is giving out. We began today's service with a speech that Martin Luther King gave up the block at Riverside Church on April 4th, 1967, a year to the day before he was assassinated. Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence is a well-known speech, but it's not one of Martin King's more lofty or fiery or hopeful speeches. As you heard as we listened to the speech together, his pace is more measured, his content is more deliberate, his tone is way more subdued than usual. And I imagine that as he spoke, King understood the reaction his speech was probably going to receive. A New York Times editorial accused him afterwards of damaging both the peace movement and the civil rights movement with that speech. And it caused a break with a president who just 2 years earlier had finally signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act of blessed memory. President Johnson was heard afterwards swearing, "What is that blank blank preacher doing to me? We gave him the Civil Rights Act. We gave him the Voting Rights Act. We gave him the war on poverty. What more does he want? What more does he want?" And so on this King holiday weekend, when we are watching much needed voting rights legislation just sort of seep away, and it is so hard not to feel in so many ways the wine is running out, I feel like I can imagine in some way what Dr. King was feeling on that fateful April evening in that church up the street. Surely Dr. King felt himself and found himself in a very low place, drained of hope, drained of energy, and maybe even drained of the will to keep going. But I don't think he stayed there. I know he didn't stay there. He didn't stay in that low place, because you can see just a few months later when he gave this famous other speech, a powerful speech, asking, where do we go from here? That, yes, he's realistic in that speech, given at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference Convention in Atlanta. He's realistic when he states, I must confess, friends, that the road ahead will not always be smooth. There will still be rocky places of frustration and meandering points of bewilderment. There will be inevitable setbacks here and there will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. But then the speech changes tone, as Dr. King tells his fellow activists, and I think tells us today, difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. And he ends, as he taps into the source of his strength, saying, when our days become dreary, with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize, he says, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And it's in that spirit, with that faith in the creative force in the universe, a creative force that King went to in prayer on a daily basis. It's with faith in that creative force that Dr. King launches the Poor People's Campaign, a campaign that in its resurrected form our congregation remains committed to today. A campaign that is rooted in the values that are urged on us by the founder of our faith, as Jesus lived among us, feeding the hungry, healing the wounded, befriending the outcast, overturning tables of greed and injustice, and telling us to do those same things, putting our love into action. Friends, there have been many times over the last few years when I could not help but feel that the wine of hope was running out. When I have found myself involuntarily singing, I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. And And those are the times I try to remember to have a little talk with Jesus, to go in prayer to my precious Lord, to take my burden to the Lord and try and leave it there. And so at this time, this draining and difficult time, as we sense that in so many ways our wine is running out, I would like to suggest that we do what Mary did at that wedding in Cana. We need to try and seek out Jesus. Seek out Jesus. And then, friends, we need to follow the instructions of the mother of Jesus, who tells those servants now and then, tells all of us who are appointed as the servers of God, do what he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. And Jesus has told us in detail the things that we are to do so that the wine of love and justice can continue to flow. Do what I do, he says. Do what I do. Feed the hungry. Preach good news to the poor. Bring liberation to the captives. Turn over those tables of greed and injustice. Let's just do what he tells us. Let's just do what he tells us.